We remember childhood through a golden-hued filter. It's a time of scraped knees and bicycle bells, of endless summer afternoons spent chasing fireflies. It's supposed to be a sanctuary, a protected space where the only monsters are the ones under the bed, easily banished by a parent's reassuring touch. It's a time of laughter, safety, and a profound, unwavering innocence. But what happens when the monsters aren't imaginary? Deep within the digital labyrinth of Reddit lie the answers. These aren't ghost stories crafted for entertainment. They are raw, personal testimonies from people whose childhoods were fractured by a moment of pure, inexplicable terror, twisting cherished memories into lifelong nightmares. Tonight, we unearth two such accounts, stories that resonate with a chilling authenticity that is impossible to ignore. We'll delve into a day at the park that took a sinister turn, where a stranger's attention became a suffocating threat. And we'll explore a seemingly innocent game that spiraled into a desperate fight for survival. These are the true childhood horror stories that still haunt their survivors, echoing in their minds decades later. These events didn't begin with a crash of thunder. They began on ordinary days, a chilling reminder that true horror often wears a mask of normalcy. What started as simple moments became scenes of abject terror they would never forget. For one Redditor, their childhood bedroom was a fortress of solitude. At 6, it was a world of sun-drenched afternoons where monsters were only in storybooks. But every fortress has a weakness. For this child, it was a small metal grate in the wall. It began subtly, with a faint scratching from behind the vent, just loud enough to pierce the night's quiet. They imagined mice and told their parents, who smiled and offered reassurances. "It's just the house settling," they'd say. But the sounds continued, and the child was left alone to listen in the dark. Soon, the scratching evolved. The frantic sound gave way to something slower, more methodical, a low, rhythmic scraping, like a fingernail dragged across metal. It was an unnervingly human sound. Night after night, the child lay awake, listening. The sound seemed to get closer, right behind the vent. Then, one night, the scraping stopped. It was replaced by something far worse, a sound impossible to misinterpret. The soft, wet, rhythmic cadence of breathing, slow, heavy, and undeniably human. It was a ragged inhale and a long, slow exhale, so close the child could almost feel it through the metal slats. For nights they lay frozen under their blankets, a flimsy shield against the horror. But the unknown is a powerful tormentor. After one long night, a desperate curiosity eclipsed the terror. They had to know. Tiptoeing across the cold floor, heart hammering, they knelt before the vent. They pressed their face to the cool metal, peering into the oppressive blackness. At first, nothing, just a void. But then, as their eyes adjusted, they saw a flicker. A tiny, wet glint of light reflecting the moonlight from their window, and another, right next to it. The child's blood ran cold. They weren't just looking into the darkness. The darkness was looking back. They were eyes, human eyes, wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on them. A silent scream locked in their throat. The child scrambled backward and bolted from the room, sobbing to their parents about eyes in the wall. Seeing the primal terror on his child's face, the father knew this was no nightmare. He grabbed a flashlight and a screwdriver. Back in the child's room, the air was thick with dread. The father knelt, his hands trembling as he worked the screws loose. With a final scrape, the grate came free. He aimed the powerful beam into the gaping black hole. The light cut through the dust, illuminating pipes, insulation, and something else. Huddled in the corner was not an animal. It was a man. He was skeletal and covered in filth, his wild, hollow eyes blinking in the sudden blinding light. When police arrived, the full horror was revealed. The man hadn't just been hiding. He had been living there for weeks. He had created a grotesque nest for himself out of insulation and rags. Scattered around were the spoils of his nightly raids, empty food wrappers from their pantry, a half-empty bottle of juice. But worse were the personal items, a single sock from the laundry, one of the child's small, forgotten toys, a framed family photo that had gone missing. He hadn't just been stealing food, he had been watching them. Through the vents, he had observed their lives, a silent phantom member of their family. As police led the handcuffed man away, his vacant gaze found the child's bedroom window one last time. The home was no longer a sanctuary, but a place of profound violation. The family eventually moved, but for the Redditor, the escape was not so simple. Now an adult, they carry the memory of those eyes. It manifests in a compulsive need to check behind curtains, a jolt of panic at a creaking floorboard. They can never sleep in a room with an open vent. often taping them shut, a futile attempt to seal away the memory. Because the true horror wasn't just the man in the wall. It was the shattering of safety. The terrifying knowledge that the darkest parts of the world can find a way into your most sacred spaces. And once you've seen eyes staring back at you from your own private darkness, you never forget. Our second story comes from a Redditor who learned at far too young an age that the brightest days can cast the darkest shadows. It begins in a place built for innocence, a neighborhood playground on a sun-drenched afternoon. For a 9-year-old, the world was a symphony of laughter, the rhythmic creak of swing chains, and the comforting warmth of the sun. It was a world that felt entirely safe, a bubble of childhood joy that seemed impenetrable. But memories, especially the terrifying ones, have a way of puncturing that bubble forever. This particular memory didn't just puncture it, it shattered it into a million pieces. The Redditor, 9 years old at the time, remembers the day a white van pulled up. It wasn't the first time they'd seen one near the park, but this was different. It parked closer than usual, right up against the chain-link fence that separated the wood chips and swing sets from the street. It was unnervingly close, an intrusion into their protected world. The van itself was unremarkable, a bit rusted around the wheel wells, windows tinted just enough to obscure the inside. It had no logos, no markings. It was anonymous, a blank space that the imagination could fill with unspoken dread. For a few long moments, it just sat there, engine idling, a silent, patient observer. Then, the driver's side window rolled down with a low electronic hum. A man leaned out. He wasn't scary, not at first. He had a kind face, a warm smile, and in his arms, he held the perfect bait, a puppy. It was a tiny, wriggling ball of golden fur, its little tail a blur of motion. The man's smile was practiced, easy, the kind you'd see on a friendly neighbor. "Hey there!" he called out, his voice friendly and light. "He likes you." And with a gentle wave, he beckoned the child over. "Want to come say hi?" For a 9-year-old, the temptation was overwhelming. Every parental warning about strangers evaporated in the face of that adorable, defenseless creature. The child swinging slowed, their feet dragging in the dirt, the momentum of their joy grinding to a halt. All they could see was the puppy. All they could think about was feeling its soft fur, its wet nose. The child hopped off the swing. They took a step forward, one step closer to the fence, closer to the van. The man's smile widened. The world seemed to shrink, the sounds of the other children fading into a dull roar. There was only the child, the man, and the puppy. But before they could take another step, a hand clamped down firmly on their arm. It wasn't the man from the van. It was a stranger, another parent who had been sitting on a nearby bench, watching their own child. They had been watching the whole scene unfold, a knot of dread tightening in their stomach. The parent didn't yell. They just held on, shook their head, and whispered a single firm word: no. And in that exact moment, the friendly facade of the man in the van crumbled. His smile vanished. And that's when the van door slid open. It wasn't a gentle sound. It was a harsh metallic shriek, a sound of machinery and grim purpose. The inviting puppy was yanked back inside. And in the darkness of the van's interior were not one but two more men. They were masked, dressed in dark clothing. They sat perfectly still, their posture rigid, their hands empty. They were silent, waiting. They were a tableau of prepared, patient violence. The trap had been set, the bait offered, and it had almost been sprung. Seeing they'd been made, the driver slammed his foot on the accelerator. The van sped off before anyone could fully process what had just happened, its tires screaming against the pavement. The illusion of the friendly man with the puppy was gone, replaced by the terrifying reality of three predators who had just missed their catch. The police were called, statements were taken. The child, now sobbing, could only describe a puppy. The heroic parent could only describe a plain white van and a smile that turned cold. They searched, of course, but the van and the men inside were never found. They had materialized out of a sunny afternoon and vanished back into nothing, leaving only a poisoned memory behind. The Redditor says they didn't truly understand the depth of the danger until years later. As a child, they were just sad about the puppy. As a teenager, they began to have nightmares. But as an adult, the realization hit them with the force of a physical blow. They understood the silence of the men in the back, the masks, the speed of the escape. They understood how close they came to vanishing without a trace, to becoming a face on a missing poster. Now, As an adult, they admit they can't drive past a playground without a cold dread creeping up their spine. They see the laughter and the joy, but they also see the vulnerabilities. They see the chain-link fences that are so easily approached. They can't help but scan the street looking for any vehicle that lingers a little too long. The memory has become a permanent filter on their world, a constant reminder of the evil that can wear a friendly face. It's a haunting that never leaves, a ghost that rides in their passenger seat whenever they pass a place of supposed safety. They remember the van, waiting at the edge, a predator hiding in plain sight. Childhood is fragile, and while most of us remember innocence and safety, some carry darker memories, of eyes staring from crawl spaces, of vans lurking outside playgrounds, and for them, those terrifying moments never fade. So I'll ask you, what childhood memory still keeps you awake deep into the night?